We're very glad you could come join us, and we have such a nice crowd today. And I have the pleasure of introducing Gregg Friesen. The first time I met Gregg and Joanna Friesen, Joanna is Gregg's wife, I was at a wedding, and honestly, I didn't notice them because I was captivated by their adorable little 18-month-old daughter running around. Well, now that daughter has a PhD in mechanical engineering, and since that time, I found out what a great birder Gregg is. So I've learned a lot since that first encounter with Gregg. And Gregg started birding in grade school after a field trip with Bob Regier to Cheyenne Bottoms. And if you do a little bit of math, that means he's been birding at least for 50 years. So that many years, you've got to have some skill built up, right? Well, yes, little bit, he says. Yeah. So we're glad he could be here today to share those decades worth of experience with us. In the spring of 2014, Gregg approached me and asked whether he could start monthly bird walks here at the museum. And his goal with that was to be sure that the activity, passion, obsession, hobby of birding continues. He had such a good time with it and likes it, and it's a way to help preserve bird species that he asked if he could do that, and I said, well, sure. I said, I likely won't be up there up every Saturday for that program, but you're welcome to start that out. And so that was 2014. I did a little math, and between COVID and a few conferences and things, I think we can safely say that Gregg has done at least 100 bird walks on Saturday morning for Kaufman Museum. So thank you for that, Gregg.
And Rod.
And Rod Weedle. And I have a note here that says, be sure to thank Rod Weedle, because Rod Weedle, wave your hand. Can't quite see, he's way in the back. Tall Rod Weedle back there. He has also been on a majority of those walks, so we appreciate that very much. During the pandemic, Gregg wanted to be able to continue bringing birding news to people and created blogs, bird bite blogs that were on the Kaufman Museum YouTube channel. And that was a nice way when at one point we weren't even able to gather outside together during the early parts of the pandemic. That was one way we could continue to bring birding news. Gregg could bring birding news to people in the area. So we are especially grateful for that. Professionally, Gregg has worked as a advanced practice registered nurse at Prairie View. He is 1 week into a retirement. And look what he did. He did a bird walk yesterday morning, and he's doing a program today. So I can only guess that there's a lot more birding in store for Gregg in his retirement. So please help me welcome Gregg Friesen today for the Western Meadowlark.
Thank you, Andy. I did this program first for Kansas Day a number of years back, and this one is the expanded version. That was the 15-minute. This is the 45 or 40. State birds always interest me a little bit. I was also a stamp collector, so a number of years back they had the stamps that had all the state birds and flowers on them, and I trotted down there with my paper route money and bought an entire block of it. And I'm too proud of them to use them, so they just sit at home. But we're going to talk about the Western Meadowlark, the Kansas state bird. It's a gorgeous bird, I think, and I think it's appropriately selected as a symbol for the state of Kansas. This is the Western Meadowlark, but, you know, if someone wants to argue that it's the Eastern, I wouldn't argue real hard with them because they're hard to tell apart. If you can see the back, it would be a little bit easier. The back on the Eastern Meadowlark is just a little bit darker. But that's like saying I'm a little taller than my brother. If you see them separate, you know, who knows if you see us. But if you see us beside each other, yeah, you could say I am a little bit taller. And the yellow on the throat on the Western comes all the way up to the beak. On the Eastern, there's a little bit of white dash there. The way you really tell these birds apart is by song. And I think I tried to have this song pulled up here. The Eastern has what I would call a little bit more of a boring song. And you hear that, it's truly a pretty song. Let's not degrade it. But I thought I had it pulled up. Here we are. But the Western, and when you hear that you truly have an absolutely gorgeous, melodious song. I love hearing it. It's been a little sparse in Harvey County, and we'll get into the reasons for that a little bit later. But when I'm hearing Eastern after Eastern, I just sort of rejoice when I hear a Western meadowlark singing. There wasn't always a differentiated bird in the Western meadowlark. Now, my guess is that native folks may have known that there were two different birds, Eastern and Western meadowlark. But for many years, it was just the Eastern meadowlark. The Western meadowlark was considered a subspecies of the Eastern. And I think that's just an Atlantic-centric viewpoint, because that's the bird that they had. And then when you came out here, you saw that other one. Well, it just must be ours, but a little bit different. John James Audubon made a trip up the Missouri River at one point, and somewhere in North Dakota, I think he finally came to the realization that there is more than one meadowlark out here in the country. And the Western meadowlark, the habitat was different, the song was different, and when he would identify them, I used binoculars, he used a shotgun. When he would plug one and bring it in and look at it, they were a little bit different. You could tell them apart in the hand, but that's still difficult. Some of you may remember Richard Schmidt, who was a taxonomist up at Emporia State University, on the faculty with a high school diploma from Gossel High, but arguably one of the best taxonomists with birds in the state. He told me that at different museums he would find that meadowlarks were misidentified. So in the hand, people missed it. And I trusted Richard. He would grill me on every bird I saw. I mean, he just thought, well, Richard, of course that's a robin. Well, you haven't given me all the field marks, he'd say. I truly loved him. Good guy. But Audubon was the first one to say this is a different bird. He named it Sternella neglecta. I can appreciate Audubon for that, because he was noted for naming lots of birds. Well, Western meadowlark, he was noted for naming lots of them after people who would give him money to publish his books. But I think he couldn't escape the fact that it was a meadowlark, and it was in the western part of the country. Sternella neglecta is the scientific name. Sturnus is starling, Sternella little starling, neglecta, the neglected little starling. This bird was named for the fact that others refused to recognize that it was a separate species. And this is where it likes to live, shortgrass prairie. You get into the Flint Hills, you're a little hard-pressed to find a Western meadowlark. You'll find a lot of Easterns. Going further east, they get thinner and thinner, with a few exceptions of some spots in Iowa and maybe into Illinois a little bit. But around here, they're a little hard to find. Harvey County is not shortgrass prairie. In fact, if I travel 72 miles to the west to Quivira National Wildlife Refuge, the dominant meadowlark is the Eastern. You can get Westerns at Prairie Dog Town and a few other spots, but Eastern is the guy you're going to get. Now, there was an argument a while back on one of the listservs I'm on. How do you know you're in Western Kansas? I know I'm in Western Kansas when I hear Western meadowlarks. That's the mark. And if you look at the habitat there, you look at it and you think, boy, I am in Western Kansas, because there's not a tree around here anywhere. They're ground nesters. They've taken some hits, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I don't know how many of you are familiar with breeding bird survey routes. There are thousands of them in the United States. They're 24.5-mile routes where you start at half hour before sunrise. You count birds for 3 minutes, go a half mile, count for 3 minutes, and you do that for all 24.5 miles. I run a route that runs from 13-Mile Road past the Tabor Church, dips down and goes past Pine Village and stops at the Turkey Creek. Western meadowlarks are less common than Easterns, although in the last 2 drought years, I've got a lot more Westerns than I had in the past. But this is a good sense from those routes as to where you'll find Western meadowlark. The darker the color, the more they are. So you can see Western Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota into North Dakota and Montana are really the hotbed of activities for Western meadowlarks. They're all over the West, but you really want to see them. That's where you're going to go. This is an eBird map of the same thing. Again, I don't know who's familiar with eBird. It's a great program out of Cornell University that utilizes citizen science. So I just did a walk here around the grounds at the Kaufman Museum. I plugged the stuff into my iPhone and I sent it to Cornell University. And they want to know how far I walked, how long I was out, how many people were with me. And all of that is used to estimate bird population. So you can see a very similar spread out for this bird as you find with the breeding bird surveys. It's a nice bird. It's around all year. It doesn't sing much in the winter. The song is the big differentiating point in the summer. In the winter, the eastern, who wants to hear an eastern? They go bzzz. The western goes chirp. So that's how you tell them apart in the winter. If they're quiet, I put down Meadowlark species. And this is comparing the eastern to the western. These are the breeding bird survey routes. And you can see the crossover in Kansas. My brother and sister-in-law from Michigan are bird watchers, and I remember once when they were out and we saw a meadowlark, and they said, it's like seeing a guy dressed like a German polka dancer speaking Swahili. I said, I don't know what we're seeing. This is a western meadowlark. You're just not used to the song, and you expect that eastern song when, in fact, you're getting something different. The overlap is pretty strong here in Kansas down into Oklahoma. A lot of places you don't see quite that range of overlap, but interesting bird. And sadly, the trend map coming out of the breeding bird survey shows the red where the population has dropped, sometimes precipitously. The blue is where it has increased. There are a few factors in that. The blue down there around Houston, my guess is that's an increase in birding activity in the coastal prairie, the former Katy Prairie. But some of the other areas, it's hard to know. But if you look at blue and red, there's two extremes. Red being the increase in decrease in population, blue the increase. It's clear that this bird is doing the same thing most of our other birds are doing, is dropping in population. People often talk about neotropic migrants and the problem that they've had due to loss of habitat. We tend to be very good at pointing our fingers south of the border. But I would ask you, take one section of land in perfect prairie, and how many meadowlarks are you going to find breeding on that? You could easily find 20, 30 meadowlarks breeding in that whole section. Take 1 acre of corn, or one section of corn. How many meadowlarks breed in it? None. Now, I'm not here to bash farmers because I buy food from them. But that's what's happened. I mean, just by necessity to feed a nation and a world, we've turned a lot of prime prairie habitat into cropland, and meadowlarks give you a good picture of what's happened with that. Okay, state birds. In about the 1920s, there's a federation of women's groups that decided it'd be neat to have a state bird for every state. They went to work on this. Different groups got states to vote on birds. And in Kansas, Madeline Aaron from Wichita, the secretary of the Kansas Audubon Society at the time, got together a vote among school children. I think they had about 5 or 6 bird candidates on the ballot. And in 1933, they held a vote. School children of Kansas selected the western meadowlark. There was some stiff competition. The northern bobwhite. And first, let me say the western meadowlark, kind of a nice bird because it does span the state, even though it's a little thin out east. The bobwhite, if I'm correct, is a little thin in the southeast, but otherwise people knew that bird. Northern cardinal, American robin, I don't know how they got on the list at that time, 1933, because Dwight, would you confirm that they were not really numerous birds around here at that time? No, not until you got some cities with trees and whatnot. So again, my guess is that the bulk of the students were in eastern Kansas when they voted. The vote from Hoxie didn't carry a lot of weight. And the prairie chicken came in 5th. The prairie chicken would have been an interesting one, more common in the Flint Hills to the west. But the prairie chicken has what I call the Maine dilemma. The state of Maine selected as their state bird the chickadee. Which chickadee? Maine has boreal chickadees and blackcap chickadees. So when they tried to get the legislature to pick one, they wouldn't. So they're left with chickadee, and nobody knows for sure which one to put on the flag. But I think it would have been a good one for some reasons. It might have been problematic for others. So in 1937, the bird known as the western meadowlark, Sternella neglecta per Audubon, as preferred by a vote of the Kansas school children, is hereby designated and declared to be the official bird of the state of Kansas. Now, it was a bunch of legislators. The neglecta should be a small n. There should be no hyphen. And if it was ornithological literature, western and meadowlark should be capitalized because this is a species, not just a meadowlark that is in the West. So we'll let that go. Okay, a little bit of problem. If you're really into state birds and you have strong opinions like I do, the meadowlark's the state bird of Kansas, Oregon, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Nebraska. In the second grade, my mom took me down to J.C. Penney's to get shirts for school. And I got two. They were red, white, and blue lateral stripes, real thin stripes. I was very proud of those shirts. I showed up at school. Kurt Wogemuth had the same shirt. Phil King had the same shirt. Tim Zare had the same shirt. There was only one place to buy shirts, and they only had one shirt. And nobody likes to go to a dance wearing the same dress as other people. So why can't 6 states find unique birds to their habitat? Why doesn't, what's wrong with some of the grouse that live up there? How about Nebraska and the sandhill crane? Oregon, the western meadowlark, well, in half the state, but not the other half. I guess it's a nice bird, and they wanted to vote for it. We're better off than the northern the cardinal, which is the state bird of 7 states, including the state bird of Kentucky, which could have selected the Kentucky warbler. Michigan has the Kirtland's warble, the only nesting place of the bird in the entire world, selected. I think it was a robin. I mean, I don't know. I don't get people's selection of state birds, but Kansas I kind of like. Nick Lund, a biologist from Maine, did some comments on state birds one time, and he said, okay, the western meadowlark, Kansas, let's leave it at that. Everybody else has to pick another one. I kind of like that. So this is it. And again, look at the yellow coming up pretty high on the top of that, by the beak, probably a western meadowlark. In fact, I think I remember taking the picture and it was singing a western song. Well, the back looks a little dark, but it's a meadowlark and it's a beautiful bird. That pattern is a little interesting because you will find there are a number of birds that have that yellow breast, that black sort of dicky tie, and a brownish color in the back. The horned lark is very similar. The dickcissel, which we'll get to a little bit later, also has that pattern. Well, I thought, in semi-retirement, sitting around, maybe there are some other birds that could be the state bird of Kansas. We'd like something that has a statewide distribution. There's 105 counties in the state of Kansas, and out of the 485 birds that you can find here, 124 of them have been found in every county. Ideally, it should be a year-round resident, but I won't hold that against some birds. We would avoid duplicating birds designated as state birds in other states, and that's pretty easy, especially when you have 6 birds with the western meadowlark and 7 with the cardinal. The selection should name a specific bird species, not be just prairie chicken, and it should somehow reflect on some aspect of the state or its people. Honorable mention, the prairie chicken. The sad thing about the prairie chicken, if we would have picked the prairie chicken, we've almost decimated the population. The original goal of the women's groups that started this was to increase awareness of conservation of birds. That was one of their goals, and maybe that would have been good. This is a greater prairie chicken. I always have to look at the sack. I can't look at the snow because every prairie chicken trip I've taken, it's been sub-freezing temperatures and high winds. The main place for this bird used to be the Flint Hills, but annual burning has just decimated the populations there. They need cover. They need cover for wintering. They need cover for nesting. And when they dance, they need places where they can get away when hawks come around. They will dance around a wooden tower. They will dance around a telephone pole. They'll dance around a tree, but they will not nest near any of those places. The issue is that they're just too vulnerable to hawks that can sit up there and pick them off. Probably the central area for this bird right now is north central Kansas, and up into Nebraska. If I wanted to find it, that's where I would go. The lesser prairie chicken has done worse. You may have seen it in the news. It was put on the endangered species list twice. It's been taken off twice. with tremendous political pressure. I think its best hope lies in ecotourism. Right now in western Kansas, you've got a number of farmers that have western prairie chicken leks on their property, and they open them up to people who are willing to pay and come out and they do a tour to see the birds. I think it's probably the best way that you're going to do this, because the politics of the Endangered Species Act in Kansas is not very good. Lek is a dancing spot. It's spelled L-E-K. Everybody should remember that if you play Scrabble, because if you get stuck with a K and you don't know what to do with it, L-E-K is a dancing ground for chickens or grouse, and it's the monetary unit of Albania. On these dancing grounds, the males get out there and dance. If you've never seen it, it's just tremendous. They dance, they sort of puff up their chests, they flail against each other. My friend Mike Rader said, a prairie chicken lek is essentially a bar where men get together and dance with the hope of mating with a female. And that's it. I mean, that's how nature works out there. And the females will stand around on the edge just seeing who's the good dancer. And that's who they'll mate with. It's just amazing.
Did I have a video for it?
Can't show it in Newton. Yeah, on Sunday, right? So let's go through my top 12 options for the state bird of Kansas. I'm going to start, of course, with the house sparrow. It's seen in every county in the state, and I think Jackson County is the only one with a circle in a circle, meaning there's no confirmed nesting there. Everywhere else it's been found nesting. It's been found nesting in every yard where I've lived. It has sort of a bad rap. It's originally a European bird. It's not a true sparrow. Unfortunately, it got called a sparrow, and actually our birds got called sparrows after it, probably. It's a weaver finch. If the criteria for state bird, it's here all year long. It's in every county. No other state has adopted the house sparrow. It's open. And let me give you a little bit of the history of it in the state. It came in the 1800s. It came to Atchison County initially. A few were released, a number of pairs, I think 4 or 5 pairs, hoping that they would decimate the insect population that was going after crops. It's a seed eater, okay? What were they thinking? The other thing it has done is it has worked to decimate the population of native cavity nesters, so chickadees, nuthatches, bluebirds. So we have a bird that's not native, came in the 1800s, and has wiped out lots of the natives in the state. What better representation of European people? I am proposing the house sparrow as number 12 on my list, but I don't think it has a chance. The blue grosbeak, related to a cardinal, gorgeous bird, and a gorgeous song. I won't play that one for you, but it's up there with the western meadowlark. As you can see from the map, I think every county has recorded it. The open circle means there's a nesting record. The circle in a circle means probable nesting. That means they maybe saw young or carrying nest material. And the dark ones are no nesting records. It likes a little scrubbier area. So, see that black line coming across in the middle? That's K96. That's kind of high ground. It's all tilled ground, not as much scrubby stuff up there, and that may be why it's a little harder to find a nest in that area. But nice color. I mean, the Kansas flag is blue. Look at the blue on this bird. It's just gorgeous. I see them in migration in Sand Creek up on the upper ends of it. They get in some of that high brushy stuff. I think this one was photographed down by the R. Michael Rhodes wetland, singing away down there, setting up a territory. So they're hard to find, but they're out there. I think it would be a beautiful state bird. No other state, again, has accepted this bird as their state bird. They all want to go with the standard ones. And the upland sandpiper. Here's a true heroic bird. It's a grassland bird, nests in the grasslands. The Flint Hills is full of them. Little hard to see, but if you drive out in the Flint Hills in late April through May into June, you'll see them sitting on fence posts like this. They're a shorebird, but an upland shorebird. They have an interesting call. It's a wolf whistle. I'll see if I can do it. And they do that with a flight display. Kind of a neat thing. What is completely amazing to me about this bird, along with the fact that no state has seen fit to name it its state bird. I mean, North Dakota, where are you at? This bird is a double grassland bird. Breeding season, I always want to say summer, but breeding season avoids that North American-centric way of thinking, is in the prairies from here north to Saskatchewan. It flies unaided on its own, without a road map, no GPS, to the pampas grasslands of Argentina for the winter. You won't see it in your yard, but you'll hear it. So in August, late August, go outside early in the morning when it's still dark. I know this because I ride bike to work in the dark at 5:30 every morning. And you'll hear chiplup, chiplup. That's these guys flying from Saskatchewan to Argentina. What a great symbol for people. That should be our state bird. That's number 10. Number 9, the turkey vulture. I like turkey vultures. They used to be kind of hard to find in the state. They require a good thermal to stay aloft. They need heat rising up. They've got a cousin, the black vulture, which is more the southern United States, but as it's warming up enough to get good thermals up here, that bird's coming north. I saw a picture last year of 5 of them eating a dead cow in Reno County, so they will get here. The turkey vulture likes its food dead and putrefied to the point you don't want to be around it. The black vulture will take your dog just after it's having a little bit of health trouble. It doesn't wait around. So it's going to be interesting when we get black vultures up here. The turkey vulture nests in cliffs, caves, old abandoned buildings. No states have claimed it. It's supposedly a bird of doom. I think in the King James version of the Bible lists it as the bird of doom. Every other version lists it as that bird as a kite in the spelling. So I don't know. People don't like birds that eat meat generally in the Bible, and they really don't like birds that eat dead meat, dead rotting animals. The two things that I think make this a really interesting bird, one is its cooling mechanism. On a hot day, if you're wearing black and you got a bunch of feathers for insulation, you got to cool down. The bird defecates on its feet, and when that evaporates, it cools it down. Now that's, no other state's got a bird that does that. The other thing this bird does, it spends all day eating rotten, putrefied meat. And when it comes home to rest, if you threaten it, it will flare its wings out, aim its beak at you, open it up, and forcefully expel the contents of its stomach on you. I had never seen that. And one day my brother called me from Pennsylvania and said, we about hit a turkey vulture on the turnpike. And he showed me a picture of his BMW just coated in putrefied meat. That's kind of neat. He did not think it was kind of neat.
I did not.
But a great bird, a very necessary part of the ecosystem. And, I think 15 years ago, I hardly saw them in Harvey County. Now, boy, you want to see them. You go down here to the elevator, and I'd like to scrape the top of that elevator from my garden. That'd be good. The dickcissel. It looks like a sparrow, but it's not. It's related to the cardinal and to the blue grosbeak that we saw earlier. It's a grassland bird, grassland nester, and the nesting success of these guys is not great. I think John Zimmerman, formerly from K-State, told me 1 out of 3, about 1 out of 3 nestlings survive. Cowbirds parasitize the nest, snakes get into the nest, you name it, they get in there. But this is one of the few birds where the song is reflective of the name. So it's called a dickcissel, and the song is dick, 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 dickcissel, dick, 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 dickcissel. On my breeding bird survey route, this is probably the most common bird I run into. It's up on the lines. So if you want to see one, drive, 90th Avenue from 13 Mile Road to the Tabor Church. You'll see all you want to see. They nest out here in the prairie by the blue sky sculpture. I found a nest on the Dick Arboretum of the Plains property several years back. It had a cowbird egg in it, too. That's what happens. But a neat bird, and nobody picks these neat birds. They all want the same thing. Oh, the crow ought to be the Kansas State bird. Dressed in black. You can actually hunt crows in the state of Kansas if they're decimating farmers' crops. And they don't do that as much as a lot of other birds. They're considered a bird, a harbinger of bad news or of death. And that's, I don't know where that comes from. It's a highly intelligent bird. This is the family that includes jays, which people sometimes see as obnoxious. They're just being jays. Crows, ravens. They're intelligent, highly intelligent. This is a bird that will use tools to open up things for food. And I saw a thing once where it understood the idea of displacement. There was a vial of water with a biscuit in it, and it couldn't reach in, so it kept dropping rocks into the vial to raise the water level up, and it could grab the biscuit. Just why would we not want an intelligent bird for our state bird? The crow. Again, not taken by any other state. It's open. It remains all year. One of my favorite sparrows, the Harris's sparrow. Name is about to change because it's named after a person. All those are going to change here soon. This guy nests way up north in Canada, and probably 95% of the population winters in Kansas or within 70 miles of Kansas. When they come, right now, I saw some just out here before the speech. There isn't that clear black. It's a little less black. It doesn't look quite as striking. But by the time they migrate north, that black bib and face are there, and they're just gorgeous. They have a song that's easy to pick out, and I can imitate it. That's it. It's the Harris's sparrow. A plaintive sort of whistle. People drive to Kansas to see this bird. When Jean Woods, is Jean here today? No, she should have been. When she came to Kansas, one of the first things she said is, I want to see Harris's sparrows. Of course, because you can't see them out east. You got to get into the prairie to see them. And with that much of the population wintering here, what better, portfolio do you need? This is also a guy. I mean, he leaves for the summer, but he's back in the winter, and in good numbers. For a long time, Winfield, Kansas, was the center of Harris sparrows in the winter. They always had the highest count on the Christmas bird count. Oh, got to get another sparrow. People come to Kansas to see sparrows. My best sparrow day was seeing 15 species of sparrows in the state in about 9 hours. The lark sparrow is a gorgeous summer resident of the state. That facial pattern is just distinctive. It's got another beautiful song. It's a prairie nester. It leaves in the summer, like some of these other birds, but a lot of people, or in the winter, a lot of people in Kansas leave in the winter. That's not uncommon, so we could count it in for that. But I think sparrows don't get their due. Just the wide range of this group of birds is just amazing. A junco is a sparrow. A towhee is a sparrow. It's kind of what we're known. People come here to see sparrows. Oh, the kingfisher. I like these guys. They rattle. They're loud. They're noisy. They belong in Topeka. They're here all year long as the water's open. They're carnivores. Put that up against our beef industry. That's great. They ought to fit in well. And there's a very unique thing about it. This is a female bird. The male bird has no rust color on it. There are very few birds where the female is more colorful than the male. And from an evolutionary standpoint, if you're a female and you're extremely colorful and you're sitting on a nest, a Cooper's hawk is going to find you and you're going to be a lunch. So females, just by default, tend to be not as flashy. But this guy has a dugout. I mean, early Kansas settlers, didn't they have dugouts? This guy digs out in a cliff face or in a bank of a creek or river, a pretty deep burrow, and that's where they nest. There's one that's been working Sand Creek down here recently. I've seen it in the last few days. Here all year long again. Nobody's claimed it. No other state wants it. The barn swallow, a resident of North America, South America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Every county in the state has a nesting record. I think that's correct. They're prolific. They arrive in April. They leave probably in October. Nobody's claimed it, and I think part of the problem with this bird is most people's experience with it is building a nest over their front door. And Or above your car, right, or just after you wash it especially. And you try and tear the nest down, which is a violation of federal law, and what happens? They build another one. So they're persistent. Maybe that's a good quality, reflects on the people of this state.
It's good.
You get one in your barn, it might make a mess, but goodbye to a lot of insects. They take them on the wing. And most farms I've ended up on bird watching, even out west, the guy said, "You want to see birds? You come in the barn. I'll show you a barn swallow." Sure enough, there they are. Well, why it is that nobody has picked a warbler for their state bird, I don't know. But the common yellowthroat, found throughout the state, you see an awful lot of nesting records there. It's got a witchety, witchety, witchety call. I find them in wetland areas or in brushy areas. It comes in, the first week of May, and it's here till probably end of August, early September. It'd make a great state bird. We would be the only state with a warbler. Again, Kentucky didn't take the Kentucky warbler. Connecticut didn't take the Connecticut warbler. Tennessee didn't take the Tennessee warbler. Nobody has a warbler as their state bird. And you go out bird watching with birders in the spring. What do they want to see? Warblers. Yeah. And nobody picked one. Baffles me a little bit. And my final one, short-eared owl. Now, this is the one I think should be the state bird if it were not for the western meadowlark. Kansas has, I think, 10 owl species that have been recorded here, some of them very rarely. This is a ground nesting bird. Owls are interesting. The great horned owl will take over a hawk or an eagle nest. A barred owl or an eastern screech owl will nest in a cavity. A burrowing owl nests in a hole in the ground, either a badger hole or a prairie dog hole. And this guy nests on the ground. He has an incredible flight pattern. It reminds me of a nighthawk, sort of a undulating, uneven flight as he flies around. And they come out before dark. This guy, obviously it was light outside. I shot this one in Stafford County, or photographed this one, and get the terminology right, in Stafford County. There was a buffalo farm up near Salina where one year Cat Ferris, who's a birder up there, said, "You got to come up and see short-eared owls. I saw 15 last night." Well, nobody believed Cat. So Pete Jansen and I go up, and sure enough, they'd had a rat explosion on this buffalo farm. And I have never seen short-eared owls like I saw up there. I've seen them rarely in Harvey County. Originally, they would have been a very common raptor here. Out west, they're a little more prolific. Nesting records, I know there's a Ness County one there. I've seen where that's at. Not a lot of records, but they're very secretive nesters. Secretive birds. People don't see them much. And I'll bet Washington County and Sheridan County have had short-eared owls, just that they're a little short on bird watchers in those areas. That's the one I would pick as the runner-up. Gorgeous bird. It barks like a dog when you hear it. Little better than the barn owl that screeches like a person in distress. So that's it. It leaves me scratching my head, just trying to think, well, should we keep the western meadowlark or not? Yeah, I think we should. I agree with Nick Lund. It was a very good choice for our state. I am surprised that they picked western meadowlark and not eastern, but good for us. It's a more beautiful singer. Thank you.
I seem to entertain questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions, I might be able to answer them at least. Actually. There are no questions, Andy. Joe Smucker might have a question here.
So there's a lot of news about Kansas being overrun with trees and cedar trees and stuff. How is that affecting native bird population?
Well, Barber County used to be the mainstay for mountain bluebirds in the winter. They were just all over there. They would come down. It was full of cedar trees, so they ate the cedar berries. But I remember hearing Ken Brunson, who at that time was with the Nature Conservancy, say when those trees burned out, the springs started running water again. So New York Times just had an article on it, called it the Green Glacier. Do you read that one? Just what cedar trees, actually they're junipers, are doing to the prairie is not very nice. They just need to burn them. Harvey County, were there trees in Harvey County when our ancestors came? I think, Dwight, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Little Arkansas watershed had trees, and that might have been about it. There just weren't trees. Ellis County, Hayes, there were a few trees on Big Creek, is what I'm told. Finney County with the Big Arkansas River running through it had no trees on the initial plotting of those counties. So you get a pasture that fills up with them. Birds that rely on just good prairie disappear. Henslow's sparrow, I think the biggest threat to Henslow's sparrow is A, annual burns, and B, not burning enough. It likes that maybe a year or 2 or 3 out of a burn, and after that it won't nest there anymore. So the last nesting record of Henslow's sparrow in Harvey County was, I think, in the early 2000s, and the field has since been left unburned, and a Henslow sparrow wouldn't call it home at all. Prairie chicken's the same.
Other questions? Hold up, pretty close to you.
Where I grew up in Ohio, we had an oversupply of English sparrows. We called them English sparrows.
Yeah.
Is that the same as a house sparrow?
Yeah, it is. There's another one called a Eurasian tree sparrow that's similar, that was released in St. Louis, and that population has gone up the Ohio and the Mississippi River. But yeah, the English sparrow is the house sparrow. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You talked about how smart the crows are. It turns out they speak English. I was planting in our garden, and a crow came by and said, "Corn." I said, "No beans," and it said, "Oh."
Yeah, there's another thing about corvids, Richard, to add to their smartness. They have facial recognition. There's a mystery book out there, I forget the author's name, but it deals with a similar corvid from England. But the interesting experiment that showed that was a group of people took a dead crow. They had a guy wear a Dick Cheney mask and walk around in this crow thing with the dead crow up on a platter. And the birds went nuts, okay? Now, anybody could walk through with an empty platter and it didn't do anything, but the minute they put on a Dick Cheney mask, the birds went nuts again. And it's been repeated several times. They can recognize faces. So you'll see some of these stories and articles about people that have a relationship with a crow where they feed it and the bird recognizes them and knows that if they're around, they're going to get food. Now, they are a smart bird. Yes.
I understand that it's been proven that they can pass on the recognition of a bad actor to their offspring.
Oh, wow. I had not heard that, but I wouldn't put it past them. Yeah. Because the social group gets it. Yeah.
Could you hear that in the back?
Yeah.
What would you say about the future of birding? I mean, there's an amazing birding community in Kansas.
Yeah.
But what with your strategies, it's great to be walking the Sand Creek Trail and seeing, getting your enthusiasm out there as much as possible. But what strategies do you have for getting more young people into?
Well, when Bob Regier took me out, my Sunday school class went with him. Our main activity of the day was shooting spit wads, pushing each other around, throwing rocks in Cheyenne Bottoms. That was it. But it sparked it in me. I saw an American avocet, and that was it. I mean, it was just an addiction waiting to happen. So I think just exposing people to the natural world is important at an early age. And people pick it up. Boy, you wouldn't believe how many people tell me I started bird watching in the pandemic because they got separated from all the other stuff that was in their life. So I don't know. When I go to birding conventions, there's the usual people selling birding field guides, binoculars, wheelchairs, walkers. I mean, that's kind of who we are. But I'm meeting more and more younger people as they go out, and the pandemic sort of got that going.
Upland plover,
Yeah.
upland sandpiper.
Yes, upland sandpiper. Although, interesting, a killdeer is a plover, and it's an upland plover.
Can you repeat the question, Greg?
Yeah, is an upland plover and upland sandpiper. Yes, they're the same. Plovers are just a little bit different than sandpipers in terms of structure, bill, and whatnot.
Right.
So aside from your walks, what other groups are out there in Kansas or relatively close that people could be part of or join
Well,
within Kansas?
the Wichita Audubon Society leads a walk at Chisholm Creek Park every first Saturday or second Saturday at 8 o'clock, and that's a good group of people. I'm active in the Kansas Ornithological Society, which meets twice a year, but it gave me contact with a lot of people that know birds well, and they were sort of formative in my experience. The Audubon societies in a number of communities, there's just not a lot. People get together. In western Kansas, there's no formal organization, but I think every bird watcher in western Kansas knows each other because they get together. I've been to some of those counts, and I know most of the western Kansas bird watchers, and they're all there when I go out there. So it's really an informal network. There's a couple of Facebook pages. The Kansas Birding Facebook page is a really good one that people use to just learn identification skills. That's a great asset. There's some that are a little bit more after those that are a little higher level in their skills, but a good starting point is the Kansas Birding Facebook page. There's a listserv out there, too. It used to be really popular. Facebook has sort of destroyed the listserv. Right? It's not much on it anymore.
Greg, you mentioned a count, and that is specifically what our exhibit's about. Would you expound a little bit on counts and the different counts that there are in Kansas?
Yeah, the Christmas bird count is the oldest one. I showed up in 1990. I had heard about it. I didn't know anybody that would be there. I kind of knew some people, so I showed up, and Dwight Platt graciously took me under his wing and took me out, and we counted birds on a cold day in Harvey County, and I learned a lot. Other formal counts are not quite what they used to be. There used to be a migratory count, but eBird kind of did away with that. Now everybody bird watches every day anyway. Those are the main ones. I mean, it's the biggest one, Andy. I would encourage people to take a look at something called eBird, just as it sounds, E and bird, all one word. You can do a lot of exploring. You can put in Harvey County, and you'll see places where people have recorded birds. So the Kaufman Museum Woods is one. The Bethel Sand Creek Trail is one. The Sand Creek Trail in Newton is one. East Lake, West Lake. You can just see what's there. Great way to find out what's around.
Could you elaborate on Merlin?
Yeah, I use Merlin, especially when I don't know songs well. Merlin is an app put out by Cornell. It's free, and I just set Merlin up and turn it on, and it starts telling me what birds it's hearing singing. So when a bird sings, the picture of the bird shows up and it lights up, and it's a tremendous way to learn bird songs. Now, it's about 95% accurate. Well, maybe 90. I don't know. But people will tell me some of the things they have in their yard. No, they do not have that in their yard. I know that. I did not have a Spanish sparrow from Spain in my yard, but Merlin said that I did. But I encourage you to get it. It's probably the best learning tool that I've seen come out on the electronic stuff recently. I'm going to Ecuador later this year, and I've got the birding pack for Merlin from Ecuador. So if I don't know a song, it'll tell me what it is, probably. It's free again.
Okay.
Yep.
So when you record things for eBird, do you count it if Merlin just hears it, or do you have to?
No, I don't, because
Yeah.
she says, if Merlin says I heard Eastern Screech Owl, do I record it if I don't see it or hear it myself? No, I don't. Because it gets it wrong. I've sat and listened to a house finch calling, and Merlin was calling it a house sparrow. I could see it was a house finch. So it's not perfect. I record bird song and I send them into Cornell, and that's part of how they get Merlin to work. All these people that send pictures and songs allow them to to crowdsource the material they need. I was telling my son that he's the computer guy, and who's also trying to call me right now. I'll have to call back. And he said, "Oh yeah, Google does that. You know, you want to get into Google, you have to click on everything that has a motorcycle in it." He said they're training their self-driving cars to recognize motorcycles. And Merlin has us sending in these bird recordings, and they use all those to put together a good understanding of bird calls. So Merlin's great. No, everybody should have that.
Greg, every year in August, our purple martins,
Yep.
congregate in Wichita.
Yeah.
But we have a hard time finding where they are.
Uh-huh.
And Rod often helps us, but sometimes we just can't find them. And I've looked on Facebook and various places, but nobody ever says. Is there a place to find that?
Where I would go to eBird, and I would do Explore, and I would put Sedgwick County, and I would look for a purple martin number that's off the charts. Scroll down. Rod, that's probably the best way, isn't it? Yeah, because somebody's seen him and reported it. Yep.
One more question?
Andy, I've got.
Okay.
Greg, can you talk a little bit about how, like, Curtis direct community science initiatives like Merlin or eBird or Backyard Bird Survey or Christmas Bird Count feed back into your days or time as a bird?
Oh, yeah, into my less than pure activities. I want to see a winter wren. I can go on eBird and find out that I only need to drive 15 miles because Rod and Pete Jansen saw a bunch of winter wrens on the Little Arkansas. I think it's now called a creek, and I can kind of see where they were. So it guides me an awful. It's just like it's replaced the listserv. I don't need to ask other people. I can see the data that they dump into this database and see where to go. When I go to, I'll go down to Texas, the Bolivar Flats near Galveston this year, and I'll just look on eBird. I can ask it, show me what's at Bolivar Flats in the month of April, and it'll give me not only a list of what's there, but it'll give me a bar chart that shows me how many of them are there by week by week. So I know what to expect, and I know what to be ready for. Christmas counts, I used to read through them front to back, sort of see what was there, but I also like to see who was on the count. It's a social circle. No, it's phenomenal amounts of data. Heston College used to have an Audubon Society back in the 20s. They had nothing like this. They had terrible field guides. I mean, they had Morris Yoder. That's what they had. It'd say, go out and you might see this or that. What has done away with a little bit is some of the social aspect of it, because it used to be if I wanted to know what was where, I had to know people. I want to see a barn owl, I better know a farmer, and I better be nice to him. Now, I can look up and see that there was a barn owl, and it's on the farm of a young couple near Newton, and I drive out there, and I drive by a few times and get up the nerve to ask them if I can look in their barn, and they say, yeah. So it's a lot of information. All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg. We hope you can join us on Kansas Day, January 27, and I assume Greg would be willing to keep answering questions for those bird enthusiasts that just want to keep talking.